Hi, it's Byron from FireBoard. Today you're going to install your new FireBoard Pellet Drive. First, you need to gather all your necessary items. Here's what ships as standard with your FireBoard Pellet Drive. First, pellet drive itself and the rubber gasket, which helps keep the elements out. We have a wiring harness. It ships with 2 food probes and an ambient probe with grill clip. We have a quick start guide and other documentation, a drill guide for mounting your pellet drive to the pellet grill. We have 4 screws for that mounting, a drill bit to drill pilot holes for the screws, a blue connector for the internal temperature probe, and a screwdriver to mount that probe to the connector. If you've purchased one of our optional mounting accessories, here's what comes with those. For the easy mounting plate, it comes with the plate itself and 4 machine screws, which screw the pellet drive into the mounting plate. For the magnet mounting method, we have the 4 magnets, and we have 4 spacers, 4 hex screws, and a hex or Allen wrench. You'll need to gather these items on your own: a drill, a Phillips screwdriver, and some tape. And of course, you're going to need the grill itself. So let's get started. Let's move outside and get started with the installation. First, you need to make sure your smoker is unplugged. Perhaps that goes without saying, but make sure your smoker is unplugged. After that, we identify where the screws are that hold on your original controller. Typically, they are front mounted and there's 2 screws, as in this smoker. So we'll unscrew these with our Phillips screwdriver. If you have a drill with a Phillips bit, feel free to use that as well. Now we need to keep these screws for use later, so make sure you know where they are. You'll gently pull out the controller and the wires with it. These wires are typically connected together with these white or clearish Molex connectors. Before you disconnect them, you'll want to make note of what goes where. Typically, the yellow is the auger, the black is power, the purple is the igniter, and the red is the fans. If your wires internally are those colors, then you probably don't need to mark them separately. But if they're not those colors, make note of where they go and put a piece of tape and label them separately. Now to disconnect, you just take these connectors, hands on either side of them, and just gently pull apart. Now this final wire is your internal temperature probe. These attach to circuit boards in a variety of methods. Probably the most common is with this circuit board mounted connector. The little screwdriver that comes with the FireBoard Pellet Drive can aid in just removing those wires from this connector. If your internal temperature probe is mounted in a different way, if it's soldered to the circuit board or with a different kind of connector, you can simply just cut the wires, but then you'll need to strip back some of the fiberglass sheathing to expose the bare wires for reinstallation. We're going to start the installation by attaching the wires. First, we're going to start with the internal temperature probe. Now, it doesn't matter which of these wires goes to what connector on this connector or what port on this connector. We first have to open up the jaws of this connector. I don't know if you can see that, but we open these up by turning counterclockwise. Then we'll put these wires in. Again, it doesn't matter which wire goes where. And then we'll tighten these clockwise onto the wire. Make sure that's good and solid. Test each wire separately. Now we'll move to the internal wires. We have our wiring harness. Now this wiring harness actually has 5 connections because some pellet manufacturers actually have 2 fans inside. So we've accounted that with fan 1 and fan 2. Typically you'll just use fan 1. So we just go back through and we start finding the wires. Now luckily ours have the actual name of the item printed here on the wire. So this one says auger. So we'll reach deep in here and we'll plug that auger wire in just by pushing those together. Here we have our power, it's black. We'll plug that in. Here's our igniter. And then finally, we have our fan. And we'll look for the one that says fan 1, and that's this one. And we'll just plug that in. At this point, we'll just push these back in and we'll prepare for the mounting method that you've chosen. As mentioned earlier, there are 3 different ways of attaching your FireBoard Pellet Drive to the pellet smoker. The standard way is with screws mounted to the front of the pellet hopper. The second way is with an easy mounting plate And the third way is with magnets. We're going to demonstrate all of those options now. Using the drill guide template, we're going to find the best mounting location for your FireBoard pellet drive. We're going to try to cover up that opening as best as possible. Then we're going to use this tape that I prepared earlier. We're just going to tape this to the sides of the pellet smoker. Now we're going to take a drill that you provide with the drill bit that we provide, and in each of these 4 locations there's a little plus, and that's where the screws go. We're just going to put our drill bit right here. We're going to make a mark where each of those locations are. Then we're going to remove the template. Now we're going to fully drill out those locations. We're going to take our FireBoard pellet drive, and on the back of here we have 2 connections that we need to make. Here's the main wiring harness, and here's the internal temperature probe. Find the wiring harness that you attached earlier, and we're going to plug it in right here on the back of the circuit board. Make sure it's fully seated. Then we're going to find our internal temperature wire with that blue connector. And there's only one way for this to go on. And you push that in and make sure it's fully seated. Now we're going to take our green ground wire, and using one of the screws we saved earlier from the original controller, we're going to put that screw through that loop, and we're going to attach it to one of these positions that the original controller used to mount to the pellet smoker. We're going to flip this over, and we're going to undo these little tabs. And we're going to drop screws in each of these corners. Now here's where it gets a little tricky, because this gasket is a little floppy. So you'll need to make sure these little tabs aren't caught underneath like they are here. There we go, we get those out. And then gently we'll push these wires back in here. And we'll try to line these screws up a little bit with these holes. Now I find it's best to just find one of these here in the upper right. Find that hole and just secure it just a little bit to help hold that on. If you have a drill or an impact driver with a Phillips bit, that might make this go a little easier, but you don't want to over tighten these screws anyway. Once again, I'm making sure that gasket is fitting properly all the way around there. You want to make sure that that gasket isn't folded over in any way. And then we're going to just do our final tighten here. We don't need to tighten it super tight, but we want to collapse that gasket just a little bit to help keep the elements out. Finally, we put these plugs back in. Installation is done. We're ready to plug in and power up. We have 2 easy mounting plate options. One is a taller plate to fit larger or taller holes. It would work in this case, but the plate would hang below the pellet hopper and may not look as great. So we have a shorter one as well. It'll fit right there, the holes line up. The great thing about these easy mounting plates is they use your existing hardware, the screws from your original controller, and the holes, so you don't need to drill any extra holes or do anything special. So before we start mounting that, we need to find our wires. We put that through, and then we put also our internal temperature probe wire through this hole. We hold that up. Now we're going to take a screw, one of our original screws that we held on to. This gets a little tricky. I use my pinky here just to hold that screw in place. And then we're going to screw this in just a little bit, just to hold it up, but so we can still move it around a little bit. Now before we put on the other screw, we need to take our pellet drive. It has this green ground wire, and we're going to attach that to the body of the smoker using this other mounting hole. We'll take the original screw, put it through this eyelet, take our screwdriver, gets a little tricky as well, secure that nice and tight. Then we come back up here and we tighten this screw all the way. Now it's time to connect the wiring harnesses. Here's the main wiring harness. It goes in only one way and it makes a nice click or snap. Make sure that's nice and snug. And then our internal temperature probe, it also goes in only one way. Give that a nice push and it secures nice and tight. So now we're ready to mount it to the easy mounting plate. We push some of these wires back in so they're not in our way. We're just going to pop open one of these plugs right there. We're going to drop in one of these machine screws that come with the easy mounting plate, and we're going to line that up. Now this gets a little tricky because the gasket is in the way. But once we find that screw hole, we just attach that. We go ahead and push that plug back in, and we'll do this with each of the corners. Now of course once you get the first two done, then you won't have to do as much lining up because it should be lined up already from the factory. All right, now that that's secure, we can just pop these caps back in to help provide some weather protection. Your installation is complete, power up, and you're ready to go. If you've purchased the mounting with magnets method, just gather your materials and your pellet drive and we'll get started installing that. To install the magnets, we first start by popping off these little caps. We can use the provided Allen wrench if you want to. We take one of these hex cap screws, pop it in that opening and push it all the way through with our hex Allen wrench. We take a spacer, one of these white spacers that are provided, and one of these magnets, and we pop that right over. And then we just start screwing the screw onto the magnet. Get that nice and tight. Then we pop that cap back on. Now we'll do it with the next corner. We pop that cap off. And our last one. Put the hex cap screw into the corner. Push it all the way through. Put that spacer on. Then the magnet over the spacer. And we screw the screw into the magnet. Tighten that up. Put the cap on. Now we just need to attach the wiring harnesses. So we reach in and pull the main wiring harness out. It only goes in one way and it attaches right here to the back of the circuit board. It makes a kind of a nice click. It's nice and solid. Then we find our internal temperature probe wire with that blue connector we put on previously. We put that right here to this connection on the back of the circuit board, and it only goes in one way. It makes a nice secure connection. If you want to, you make sure both of those are secure. So before we attach it or before we put it onto the smoker, we need to attach this green ground wire. So we take this screw that we kept previously from the original controller, put it through that eyelet, and then we're just going to attach it here to one of these mounting points that the original controller was connected to. Make sure that's nice and tight. Now, obviously, these are magnets, so all we got to do is push these wires back in, put it on. Now you're ready to go, ready to fire it up and get going. Congratulations, you've just installed the FireBoard Pellet Drive. All you need to do now is plug it in, power it up, download the app to your phone, connect it to the cloud, and enjoy the wonderful world of FireBoard pellet control.